We talk a lot on this podcast about making disciples and reaching the next person for Jesus. And while we want these ideas to be embraced by everyone in our entire church family, we know that the next generation of young adults have got to be captured by God's mission if we want to see expansion of the kingdom in our society. So how can we make sure that we are enlisting, equipping, and sending the youngest members of our adult population out as partners in this mission? Let's chat about it. Welcome to Clear Creek Chat. That's Chat with two T's because this podcast is coming to you from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and is a ministry of the Clear Creek Church of Christ. In every episode, we gather together a friend or two to talk about issues that touch our lives locally and also have broader implications for the kingdom of God. My name is Mitchell Halstead, and today I'm joined by a couple of guys that we haven't heard from in a while, my fellow ministry pals, Michael Chambers and Sean Alex Smith. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Good to be here, sir.
Good to have you here. I want to ask y'all a question. We're all church ministers here and various backgrounds. But we were joking a minute ago about these phrases that we often hear either used by just church people or maybe by preachers or someone from the stage. And I thought it'd be funny if we just each shared one of our favorite, in air quotes, church phrases that we might hear. So who wants to go first?
You got it.
Okay.
Let's unpack that.
Unpack that. What does that mean?
I don't know. It's not a suitcase. Like
It's a suitcase of ideas.
It's a suitcase of
figurative suitcase, I guess.
It is.
Have to unpack it.
The phrase meaning, let's explore this idea.
But normally it's kind of like, if somebody says that, it's kind of like a clown pulling the thing out of his shirt or something. It's like never ending, and it just keeps going and going and going.
Let's unpack this podcast episode over the next few minutes.
We're about to unpack
Michael,
this idea.
We're about to unpack it. Let's chat about it. That's my version of that phrase.
Right, for sure.
Michael, what about you?
So I've heard quite a bit in my time. Let's lean into or press into that.
It's a good one.
It makes sense and like
Sure.
it usually works for what it's being said for, but it's just you don't hear that anywhere except in church circles. You know?
I hear it at a lot of church conferences.
Exactly. Yeah, it's usually conferences or like in like staff meetings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like we're really trying to push into this right
Yeah,
now.
and
like,
it makes sense.
it does.
It's just a funny phrase.
You don't hear it anywhere else though. Like
Probably not.
I've worked other jobs. Like when I was doing student
I've done other things, guys.
He worked at Food City.
when I was doing student teaching, like the principals would not come in to be like, guys, we're really trying to lean into teaching these students.
Maybe if you would use that in your classroom, you would be a teacher right now.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
You would have those
They would've-
students leaning
they
in.
would have retained me.
That one doesn't. That one makes sense. All right, so mine is the classic separate and apart. I did not grow up hearing that phrase used during communion to separate it, but that's always fascinated me. Like when I went to college, even though I did grow up Church of Christ, I didn't hear that, at least don't remember it. So when I went to college and friends from varying degrees of Church of Christ backgrounds started hearing that phrase, and I didn't know what it meant. So I kind of had to have it explained to me, just some of the theological implications of communion being separate and apart, the contribution being separate and apart from the communion. It was always just a fascinating idea to me. So whenever I do hear that, it kind of triggers this like funny memory in my mind of like learning what that meant. So, I don't know. We learn things as we grow, I guess.
It's funny.
So we're not trying to disparage any of these comments. They're just things that we kind of find somewhat humorous when we hear them.
Just run into them a lot.
And have inevitably used all of these phrases probably in our time. So if you use these phrases, dear listeners, we're not mad at you. It just makes us smile a little bit. All right. So a little over 10 years ago, around the time that I moved to Chattanooga, our church had a very healthy number of 20-somethings that called this church family home. I'd even say that our church was kind of proud of it back in those days. But as typically happens, we got older. You know, we had kids, and then all of a sudden we weren't the young professionals anymore. We had become getting older professionals, if that's a phrase that we could use. But if you've been around our worship services over the last few months, you would have seen an increasingly large number of current 20-somethings, the new crop, you might say. And they're often sitting together in sort of a pack. These are our young professionals, or the young pros, as we typically call them. And it's been really exciting to see how many of them are getting connected and engaged with our Clear Creek family. So right now I've got Michael and Sean Alex both here representing the Young Professionals group. Of course, both of these guys work with me here on staff. But I want to take a moment here to kind of explain what this group is and how it functions. So Michael, I know that you and your wife Abby have been very instrumental in helping get this thing off the ground, and you've made it a special focus between the two of you. So I want to kind of begin by asking you to explain exactly how this group functions, because as far as I understand it, it's not just a typical small group that we have many of. This is something a little bit more, it's more than that.
Yeah, and it kind of had to become more than that not too long ago. So we, like you said, we kind of gained momentum and gained a lot of steam post, in the coming out of pandemic. Obviously, we're not totally out of it yet, but since we've been on the back half of it, it's really when we picked up a whole lot of momentum. And it started off very much like a standard small group. We'd get together, we'd do a little Discovery Bible study, something like that. There was a small crew, 6 to 12 was like a great number for us to have. And that was kind of what we were looking at. 12 definitely at first was not even remotely close to what we would have normally had. But yeah, standard, when we were able to function like that. But as we have grown, we have sort of had to shift the way we operate, because we've kind of passed the point of being able to reasonably do a standard Bible study with the size group that we have, because there are times that we'll have 20 people, 30 people, and we got in our group message, for example, there's about 32 in there, which is pretty cool. I don't think we've seen all 32 there at one time, but it's larger than would accommodate a good intimate Bible study. So because of that, we were debating. We were like, do we have to split? What do we have to do? And we talked to Jake, one of the leaders here, and he kind of coached us through what the next phase would look like. And rather than breaking up and doing multiple groups, we've kind of been told or coached that can often kill your momentum rather than keep it going. So what we have done instead is formed instead of a small group, we are technically called a missional community, which is an actual term. Like, it's not a fancy, it's not a churchy phrase that we made up.
Can we unpack that right now?
Let's unpack a missional community. Yes.
I'm leaning in.
Yeah, I'm going to lean into, we're really leaning into this missional community idea.
But it's separate and apart from a small group, right?
Separate and apart.
Okay,
absolutely.
Cool. We just worked all of that in. It's great.
So anyway, so as a missional community, our goal is we'll come together and we'll meet. And if it's a smaller day, then we'll all just meet together and kind of have a standard study on a Sunday on our standard meeting time, like a regular small group would. But the idea is we'd come together on, whenever our meeting time is, have a little powwow, maybe eat some food or whatever, hang out together for a bit, catch up, and then split into smaller groups within our group time. And it could be guy, girl. It could be just like numbered off. It could, whatever seems to fit the conversation that day. And we kind of will have it led by different, groups of people. And that's sort of how we do it as far as like direct meeting times go. So we're basically a large small group that splits up into smaller small groups as far as our meeting times go. But the focus of our group, since we have such a large group that's in the same phase of life, that has the freedom that this group would have, this is where the missional community kind of aspect comes in. So the purpose of this group is, yes, we want to study and grow together and support each other and be that community that we all need. But we want to use our group being as large as it is and as healthy as it is as a resource to reach out to everyone else. So as a group, we'll choose different times to go out and do things that would be considered easy access points to bring people in. So go to a baseball game or a restaurant or go to the park or whatever. We'll say hey, I'm going here, come if you want to. And whenever we do that, those are the times that are understood to be you invite a friend to come. And it's just to get the people in your circles of influence, where you work, play, and live is a phrase we've used here before. Create access points that are very easy to bring them in. It's not a Bible study like Sunday would be, because it's really hard to bring in somebody, especially if they're completely unchurched. You're not going to bring them in to do an intense Bible study. That's just, but if you get them in, get them connected with that group of people, they start to make some friends, they start to feel comfortable. Well, they know you're all connected through church. And so that sort of opens the door for that conversation to be had more. And so, because we are all young, none of us have kids, when we're all kind of in this this phase of life together, it creates this flexibility and this cool place that we're at in life that we can operate that way, that it would be much harder to do down the road. So yeah, that's sort of the general premise of what we do. So yeah, technically, like our group message actually says, it doesn't even say small group, it says missional community. So yeah, we've kind of we've leaned into once again
the proper narrative.
The proper narrative. Oh, that's another good phrase.
Narrative's good.
Narrative.
Yeah.
Oh
Hear
my
that one a
goodness. So yeah, that's that's the gist of sort of what we exist to do and how we operate.
Sweet. So Sean Alex, you are a fairly recent addition to our church family here. You've been here around 6 months at this point, and you've kind of found a home within this group because you fit into that young professionals age range. And you are, of course, on staff here, but with regards to this group, you kind of get to just be another one of the guys, right? Another one of the people in the group. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what has been the experience for you getting connected to this? We call it a missional community, the missional community of the young professionals.
Yeah, so my experience was different than Michael's just because I came around later. So the first time I came to Clear Creek to check out the church, to sing on the praise team, Michael, me and him went to Salsaritas. We picked up Salsaritas, and then we went over to
always a good choice.
There's the Foxes.
Yeah, to their house or their apartment, and there was a good number there that day, probably
15, 16,
at least 15. 15
they were there for you.
Yeah, probably not. I hate to disappoint, but no. But it was really nice people. It felt warm. It felt, inviting, and it was just really good to see a church that had people like me there, because it made me feel like, it would be easy to be a part of this community.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So as we've often mentioned on this podcast, our church's mission is Jesus' Great Commission. The way we say it is to reach the next person for Jesus. So how is your group promoting this mission within your small group missional community? Try to use those phrases.
Yeah, that's good. We call it small group all the time too. It's just because we called it for the longest time. It's really hard to. Hey, are you coming to missional community today? That's not easy.
It feels like monks. If I say missional community, I just picture monks.
Maybe you need an acronym that uses the word monk. Mission. I don't know. We'll work on that.
We'll figure that out. Community spelled with a K.
Probably not.
Yeah, but anyway. So how are we promoting the mission within the group?
Mission?
Well, that's been the focus from the beginning. But what we have tried to make a point to do on many occasions within the group, like there's been times where we've sent it around and basically said, like, who's the person in your circle that you can reach out to, and we've all outright said people by name, and prayed about them. And we've checked back up on them. And so we know who different people within the group, like, for example, Luke, he mentioned that there was he works at the school, and he mentioned that there was someone who works in the cafeteria that he was wanting to check. And so we're like, hey, Luke, how's the lunch lady? Like, and we know that. And Abby, who is, by the way, to the listeners out there, my wife, the tens of listeners, Abby and I started this thing, but she's the head honcho. I am leader number 2 by far, and she will be she'll be on another podcast down the road, so she'll get to talk a little bit more from her perspective. She's been absolutely the ringleader as far as outward focus goes, but and she's done fantastic with it. And so she's got people within her circle too, that within her soccer, like she plays in some soccer leagues, and she's got people within there that she's made a point to be missional with, and that's been really cool to see. She'll talk about that later on. And then but basically, point is, we have made sure to communicate with one another, the different people. Like, for example, Blake Jacobs, who's another guy who's been he's an OG member, as they say. He's one of the original.
That is what they say.
That is what they say. One of the very first people. I came to Clear Creek. It was like 2 weeks in. I was like, oh, that guy looks close to my age. I need to get him.
We should be friends.
We should be friends, and we are friends. He's a good dude. But anyway, he's a landlord, and he rents out rooms in his house to people, and he's had some really interesting conversations, and it's just been cool because we know by name certain people within the group that we're supposed to be praying for and supposed to be reaching out to. And so we make it, basically, to answer the question though, how do we promote it? it's a frequent topic of conversation. Like, that's just how it is. Like, our group operates in the missional community style. And so we know that, like, hey, we're doing this today. You, Luke, invite this person. Blake, invite this person. Like, let's try to actually be serious about this. So because we are all directly involved in each other's missional efforts via praying for them and updating each other on it, that's kind of how we're able to stay a support system for one another on that.
Yeah, and it sounds like you guys are very intentionally trying to move past the abstract idea of reaching the next person to naming names and going after individuals and checking up on each other. So that's pretty good. Do you have anything to add to that particularly, Sean Alex?
Well, I think too that, even though we're keeping our eyes open for people who are unchurched, the way that the format of our groups are when we meet together, we're helping each other stay accountable and be on mission, because we can have open discussions. And I just think having that group where you can have open discussions about whether it's a prayer request or, a question about scripture or anything along those lines, I think that that's also helping us reach each other for Jesus and grow in discipleship.
Yeah, that's great. So I know you guys have started to kind of hint at some of these things, but how has your group tried to create intersections between your people and your group and just the community at large? Like, what have y'all done to try to put yourselves into positions where you could have influence or invite somebody in? You've mentioned a few of those, but maybe more specifically.
Yeah. So actually, I just recently formed a City League basketball team that I have a buddy of mine that I'm really trying to connect with and trying to reach out to, and I've mentioned his name within the group too. And I'm using sort of that because I know he plays ball too, just sort of using that as an intersection point for me and him to get connected. And there have been other times where we have just done like going to get food and stuff like that, just stuff that you would normally do that would be an easy invite for someone else. I think one of the best examples, and like I said, Abby has been playing soccer and she's gotten to use that, and that's been really, really cool to kind of see her, because in her case, she actually plays consistently in leagues back to back, and it's usually the same group that plays together. So it's been able to be an ongoing thing, which has been really cool. One of the coolest examples, I'll let Sean Alex talk about this a little bit because he got to kind of experience it, was recently we went to a place downtown called Southside Social, and kind of use that as an intersection point between some of the folks that we had been reaching out to. You can speak to a little bit about what that kind of looked like.
Yeah, so I was excited a few weeks ago when Michael,
you got invited.
Yeah, that too. A few weeks ago in our small group, I think it was before it was technically a missional community, Michael was saying, if we ever want to go, gather together, have a hangout somewhere else, like downtown or something, we want to make sure that our group is an on-ramp for people to come to know Jesus. So a couple weekends ago, we went to Southside Social, which is a downtown hangout. They have like a whole bowling alley in there. Upstairs, they have like dartboards. They have
skee ball.
They have skee ball, and they have, anyway, it's just a neat hangout
casual
place.
social games,
Yes.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just very chill. It's very casual. There's not much pressure.
It's a restaurant too.
Yeah,
you can
it's a
order
restaurant
food and things
too.
there.
But anyway, so we use that as an opportunity to invite anybody that we know who isn't like involved in church at all, or like maybe not our church. It's just no pressure. It's not like a Bible study. It's just, hey, me and some of my friends are coming to hang out, and you're more than welcome to come. And even though we don't have like a specific Bible study or anything,
in those moments,
then, those people are meeting people and just having casual conversations with other Christians, whether they know it or not. And hopefully through that, they'll be like, oh, yeah, I hung out with those people before. They're cool. And I think that would be those people would be way more likely to say, yeah, I'll come to small group with y'all, or I might even come to church with y'all because they've met us before and know that we're...
Or tell me more about what you're about. Or
totally.
Yeah, and
totally, yeah.
Actually, the folks that came to that were so Abby plays soccer with two girls, and both of their boyfriends came. One of the couples is kind of finding their way to Christ, and so they're very open to having conversations about it. And one of the other couples is completely unchurched, has no background at all in it. But we got to have they got to interact with all of us and
quality time
and start. We had a great intersection point right there with us and those people, and so something started there where we're able to hopefully continue to build on that in the future, because they know us now and they're cool with us, and exactly what he said is going to happen. They're going to hopefully grow to be comfortable and be like, hey, by the way, what is this about? What are you guys? Tell me a little bit more about it.
And I mean, for me, like hanging out with them, I talked to them, that sort of thing. But I mean, they felt like one of us when we were there, and I hope that they felt the same way.
Yeah, it was a place where they could belong.
Totally.
Speaking of belonging, that's one of the kind of the next points I wanted to make here. I think it's probably fair to say, and you guys could nod your heads or shake them, that as a young professional, when you're in your mid or young, maybe even late 20s, it's kind of a weird phase of life because you're no longer a youth kid anymore. You're not a college student anymore, assuming you're one who has graduated out of college. You're an adult, but in some ways you just barely feel like an adult because you're just beginning careers. You're just beginning, perhaps getting married, a family. So it's kind of a weird spot to be in because maybe you come to a church and you're like, oh, where are all the people my age? So to have a place like this is a really valuable thing. And this group has provided a space for people to plug into community and find some belonging in a way that's relevant to them. So can you guys explain, how has this group been able to function like that? Like, how have you seen people, and you mentioned this earlier when you came here, you were like, oh, this is great. So how has this group been a place where people in that weird phase of life can find some community and belonging?
Yeah. It's so important because when Abby and I first moved here, I guess a little over a year and a half ago. So I was 24. I'll be 26 next month, so a little about a year and a half ago, when we first got here, and I did not see a single soul that was my age range just in the building. Like I said, Blake, I saw him a couple weeks in. I was like, let's be friends with that guy. But outside of that, there was like nobody. And little by little, I kind of started to get like, hey, you should reach out to this person. We kind of started to see him more. But there was a long period where Abby and I just felt kind of alone. We had just come from college ministry at Tennessee Tech, and it was really strong there, and we just had a huge community.
Everyone around you was you.
Exactly, which was awesome, and then just went straight from that to nothing. And it was a bummer. And so basically we were like, all right, well, it's funny. We were kind of coached by Jake again on this one. He basically said, start it up, and gave us I remember this. He gave us the Field of Dreams quote, like, if you build it, they will come. And I was like, okay. And it really took patience, but we started it up, and, little by little, we inched into, more people kind of trickling in, and then it kind of post-pandemic, or whenever we got kind of to the back half of it, the floodgates open and more people came in. It was really awesome kind of seeing it explode like it has in the past few months. But I say that all to say it's very real, like to be our age and come into a place and feel very alone. Even if you've been in church your whole life, like I was raised in a Church of Christ, like it's not like I was uncomfortable in this building with the service or anything like that. But whenever you're not surrounded by anybody that feels like they can relate to you on a stage of life level at the very least, then it's pretty easy to feel like you are not where you belong, and that's definitely not what we want to send here. And especially the message we want to send here, and especially having been here for, a few years now, like I know that the direction and the mission of this church is something that young people will catch and love if they have a space to be brought into. And so, God's really blessed this group in a really awesome way, and is continuing to, and is going to continue to, but, it's just, let me make sure I'm answering the question here. You were saying,
well, I can step in and say, like, we've seen people that have come out of our college ministry, which is kind of a unique thing. Graduating out of that. And then now they've sort of have a landing spot, or kids that have come out of our youth ministry that maybe have even moved back home to town, to Chattanooga. Well, now they've kind of got a place that are surrounded by young professionals. Whereas they might have just been, do I go to do I go to worship and sit with my mom and my dad? Or, well, they certainly can do that, but they can also go and find people that, in the same phase of life.
Exactly. And we've actually got like, I could think in my head of like 5 or 6 examples of exactly what you just said, which is really cool. Yeah. It's been awesome. Kind of, and our group's grown a lot in that way too. Like there's been people who have been members of the church here for a very long time that have been like, oh, wait a second. There's people like me that have come back around here. Yeah. So that's just been awesome. And it's really provided just a great spark within kind of to see that come back around. But yeah, that's it's huge and it matters. And it's really a huge blessing. And I have the perspective of, I know what it was before to what it is now. And how huge this has been for myself and for Abby and for those who were kind of from the beginning. But Sean Alex, he kind of talked a little bit about, he got to come in to kind of when it was healthy and when it was kind of hitting its stride. So I don't know, what does it feel like, cause I know what it was like from the beginning to now. Speak into a little bit of like what it was like coming into it when it was already going. I know you kind of touched on that already, but.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, like, I'm proud to be at a church, to serve in a church with, hundreds of other people, with people that are our age. So I can't imagine like how you and Abby feel to see this thing like grow up, with some of your nurture and care. Like, I mean, that's absolutely awesome. I think that our small groups at Clear Creek have the tendency to be the building blocks of our whole church.
That's the design.
This is a large church. And you're not going to have the relationship just coming to a service that you would if you were like intricately. Is that a word?
Intricately.
Intimately? Well, you said it. I just can't say it.
It's because you're from Alabama.
I guess so. Or maybe it was the Arkansas at Harding. But anyway.
No offense, people from Alabama.
Or Arkansas.
Or Arkansas.
But anyway, I mean, you're connected through your small group. So, I mean, to have that is awesome. But, I mean, when I've talked to different people who aren't a part of our church, one of the first things I tell them is, there's people like you here. Statistically, the 20-somethings is the age that is absent from the church, statistically. They drop off after they graduate high school. And it's really, really cool to see not only that our group is growing, but when our group reaches out, it's incredible. People are inviting people just to church services and small group. Some girls are bringing like 9 people to church. And they
that's happened.
Hear positive comments. Yeah, I love this. So being a part of a place where people belong, where people look like each other.
They want to invite others into it.
They want to invite others into it, but the people they invite say, I could belong here because there's people like me.
This is a good thing. It's a good experience.
Yeah.
Excellent. So kind of trying to get us to the point of wrapping up here. How can all of us former young professionals, i.e. older people, and I include myself in that. I was once one of you. I am no longer. How can everybody else support and encourage all of these new young faces that we're starting to see in worship services? And we're not seeing you guys in your group time, but we know that's happening. How can we, all the rest of us, be an encouragement and a support to what's going on?
I mean, we love this church and we love the people in it. One thing that everybody needs mentorship. And there have been some, there's a handful in our group that does a Bible study with Laura, our children's minister, and they really value that time. And I've got a few young pros that are going to be small group leaders for me, and they'll get kind of mentors with the other small group leaders. But
sure.
With the youth ministry, I say small group leaders, I'm talking about within the high school ministry. But honestly, just come say, hey, we want to we're bought into this place. We're bought into this family. And, obviously I'm a minister on staff here, so it's different for me, but speaking on behalf of the group, they want to know people within the church. They want to feel a part of this family because they definitely feel a part of the community with one another, and they're bought into the mission of the church. But we want to know, as a young 20-something, it's always great to have mentor families and people that love us and care us and want to take us to dinner and buy us food. And
I bet you really like that.
It's good stuff. It's simple as that. Just come and say, hey, offer to Daryl Arundale, one of our elders, contacted me the other day and was like, hey, y'all come have small group at our house one time. We'll make you some burgers and just like,
Sweet.
stuff like that. We would love to just connect more because it's so valuable to have those connections with people who are a little further down the road than us.
Absolutely.
And everyone, whether they want to admit it or not, craves mentorship to some degree. And so we want to have those connections, and we want to have those people that we know we can turn to and connect with and get coffee with and just chat about life, that are, have a little bit more perspective down the road from us. So that's, just come say, hey, come get to know us. Pretty much.
Yeah, I would say, we are just a small part in a greater community.
Mm-hmm.
And God was so creative when he created his creation. He created people of all different colors. He created people who would be different ages, different backgrounds, different cultures, and we all work together. The scripture comes to mind. You have the one about the body parts, and we all work together. We all work together.
The ear, sure.
And I think it's important that we just all have community with one another to accomplish Christ's mission for us.
That's great. Last question, y'all. How can people be praying for the young professionals specifically, for them to adopt the mission, all the various things that y'all are trying to do? How can people be praying for you?
Yeah, I would love prayers, for one, just regarding that we would continue to adopt and lean into,
Yes.
3 times so far, the mission of just reaching the next person for Jesus. That's a lot of us are lifer church people, and like anybody else in the church, it's very easy for us to get kind of caught up in just getting together and talking about Jesus, but not actually being serious about this mission idea. And like I said, we are trying to take it seriously, but it can be very easy to slip back into old habits. Those die hard. So just prayers that we would continue to be serious about that, because if we have that zeal, that's going to spread. Yeah. I mean, that's I know that the energy that young people bring to a group can really kind of jumpstart the momentum. So if we're being super missional, I think that's gonna be very influential. So not just for the sake of the church, not just for the sake of our group, but for the sake of everyone that we have influence over. We want prayers for that. And then secondly, prayers that we continue to grow. I mean, we want this group to not just be like a group that exists in the time being, and then we all grow as a unit into our 30s and have children and split up, and then there's no 20-somethings again, like you said happened 10 years ago. Yeah. We want this to be something that this becomes a part of the culture. So we want us to establish some sort of foundation, and this is what we need prayers about, for God, because I don't know exactly how to do this, but for God to reveal to us what it means for us to lay down the groundwork for this to be a regular part of this church body. And so, we need prayers about both of those things. And then I guess lastly would just be that we would continue to grow and be an encouragement and love one another. Because as you grow, growing pains happen, and people kind of get tired of each other or whatever. But this group is more than just a group of friends. It's for a purpose. So just prayers that we would stay strong and united would be very much appreciated. But yeah, that's sort of my top 3 concerns at the moment.
Yeah, I would say just that God will continue sending people in our paths. That way we can get them and show them our community. But also just for the larger church, as we try to figure out ways that we can reach younger people, we want to be a church with people of all generations. So just trying to figure out how we can work together best.
That's great. Well, guys, that's all the time we have for our chat today. Thank you for both of you for joining me and for sharing some of the exciting things that are happening within particularly the young professionals population, but the fact that that's going to influence and have an impact on all the rest of us as well. So thank you guys for sharing those things. To the rest of you out there, remember, if you are a disciple of Jesus, it is your job you are called, I should say, to spread the good news of him to your neighbors throughout your city and to the very ends of the earth. Grace and peace.